When it comes to consoles that deserved better, the Sega Dreamcast was one of the biggest what-ifs in gaming. Back when it first came out, I had a buddy who had one, and a few of us would cram into his basement and play it for hours. Soul Calibur, Power Stone, Crazy Taxi. The games were loud, fast, and totally different from anything on the PlayStation or N64. But back then, I never owned a Dreamcast myself, but when I finally did pick one up a few years later, they were so cheap and plentiful, they never really felt all that special. I'd play it for a while, then sell it off when I got bored with it. It was just kind of around. But recently, something's changed. Maybe it was nostalgia, maybe it was a craving for some obscure retro gaming. Whatever the reason, the Dreamcast started clawing its way back into my brain, and I went down the rabbit hole. I started watching YouTube videos, reading forums, pulling up game lists, just trying to figure out why this thing wouldn't leave me alone. So I made a plan. I'd track one down again, pick it up, and make a video walking through the whole experience. The good, the bad, and everything in between. What does it really feel like to own a Dreamcast over 25 years later? That's what I wanted to find out. So with that goal in mind, I started to keep an eye out. Nothing too serious at first, just checking local shops and hoping that I'd get lucky. Maybe I'd stumble across one at a garage sale or a thrift store, like the good old days. Then one afternoon, I spotted one in a cabinet in the corner of an antique shop in my hometown. No box, no games, just a console and a controller, and a price tag of $160. I actually laughed out loud. I thought no way was it worth that much. But just to be sure, I checked eBay, and that's when the reality hit. Dreamcast prices have gone way up. Consoles usually sell for about $130 to $200 now, unless if you don't mind if it's broken or nasty yellow. Ugh. It turns out that thing in the antique store wasn't grossly overpriced, it was just sorta overpriced. So about a week later, while traveling through a small town, I wandered into yet another antique shop and spotted another Dreamcast, this time for a more reasonable $100. Just a console, a beat-up controller, and a promise that it was tested. It felt risky, but I couldn't help myself. Once I got it home, reality set in. The analog stick was junk, it didn't come with any cables, and the only saving grace was a no-name memory card that miraculously worked. After buying an AV cable and a replacement controller, I was out $130. So not really the deal I thought it was. But now I had a Dreamcast again, and even though it still needed work, I was in. My new Dreamcast may have been tested, but it smelled like it had survived a house fire and a barbecue. Inside the console, the vents and fan had that grimy texture you only get from decades of nicotine and neglect. Like it had been on the shelf of a smoker's den just absorbing sin. Thank goodness there were no bugs inside, but the whole thing needed a good cleaning. Unfortunately, I couldn't just hook it up and go. This thing was gonna be a project. I cracked open the shell and went full restoration mode. Isopropyl alcohol, Q-tips, toothbrush, compressed air, the whole spa day. The Dreamcast is actually one of the more user-serviceable consoles from its era, which helps, but it was still hours of cleaning just to get it back to displayable. So when I was zoning out and cleaning this thing, it actually hit me that this hobby isn't really the same anymore. These old systems used to be a dime a dozen garage sale finds. Now they're restoration jobs, time capsules that need patience, tools, and just enough stubbornness to see them through. If you're not handy and you're trying to get into Dreamcast these days, well, good luck. It took a while to get it all cleaned up, but once I plugged it in and that little orange light flickered on, it was all worth it. Once the console was cleaned up and ready, I hit up a few local game shops to find something to actually play. And that's when the second reality of Dreamcast ownership hit me. The games aren't cheap and plentiful anymore either. The best I could find nearby were 3 titles: Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, Worms Armageddon, and Trick Style. Not a bad haul. Tomb Raider is classic tank control adventuring with puzzles and pit traps galore. Worms is a chaotic turn-based game where players trade shots trying to blow each other up. And Trick Style is a futuristic hoverboard racer that feels like if Tony Hawk had a baby with Wipeout. It's difficult, but pretty fun. All decent picks, but hardly the iconic Dreamcast library I was craving. And as for the heavy hitters, forget it. Sonic Adventure used to be a $10 game everywhere. Now it hovers around $50 for a loose disc. Skies of Arcadia, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Jet Set Radio, all climbing fast. A lot of the Dreamcast's best titles have crossed over into collector pricing, where you're paying more for nostalgia than gameplay. It's fun, but if you're going in blind, prepare your wallet. Now here's where things get weird and kind of brilliant. The Dreamcast is one of the only consoles that can boot burn games straight off a CDR without any hardware mods. No chips, no soft hacks. Just burn a disc, pop it in, and you're off. It's like Sega accidentally left the back door open on their way out of the console business. Official Dreamcast games were released on a proprietary format called GD-ROM. Basically, a supercharged CD that could store up to 1 gigabyte of data. But because many games didn't actually use all that space, the modding scene figured out how to compress or trim them down to fit on standard 700 megabyte CDRs. Sometimes the audio or video was downsampled or extra languages removed, but most of the games held up surprisingly well. Sometimes they would even optimize the disc layout so the Dreamcast laser didn't have to jump around as much during gameplay. In some cases, some rips were actually better for your hardware than the original retail discs. Now, I'm not saying you should pirate games, but let's be real. When the original discs are rare, fragile, and selling for the price of a used Switch, the line between preservation and piracy starts to blur. Of course, just when everything was working, it wasn't. The Dreamcast may boot up like a champ, but its weakest link, the optical drive, is starting to show its age. Sega, reportedly strapped for cash during development, went with a more affordable laser assembly to cut costs. Over 25 years later, we're feeling the effects. The disk drive sounds like a DJ scratching a turntable with sandpaper, and the performance reflects it. In my case, I got about 4 hours of gameplay before things started going downhill. Retail discs that worked fine suddenly wouldn't load. I checked the power supply voltage and it was fine. That meant it either needed new capacitors on the main board or the lasers board, or just the laser fading out completely, which is sadly a common issue with these consoles. There is a temporary fix, adjusting the laser's potentiometer. It's like giving the laser a tiny jolt of caffeine. Enough power to get it reading again, but not a long-term solution. Turn it too high and you risk burning it out entirely. The real fix is something like the GDMU, an optical drive emulator that replaces the disk drive entirely. It's fast, quiet, and lets you load your whole library digitally. But there's a catch. You lose the ability to use discs at all. So unless you've got a second Dreamcast lying around, it's a tough call between preservation and purity. I enjoy browsing game shops and picking up physical media, and that would suck to buy a game and not be able to pop it in my console. Still, if your laser's on its last leg, the GDMU might be your Dreamcast's second life. Now, if you're going to own a Dreamcast, you have to get a VMU. It's not just a memory card. It's a tiny LCD screen with its own D-pad, buttons, sound effects, and even a few hidden surprises depending on which game you're playing. I grabbed one at a local game shop for $25, which brought my total setup cost to $155 now, games not included. The screen on mine is a little smeary, and the contrast isn't great, but hey, it still works. I guess it's not bad for something this old. Some games come with bonus mini-games that you can transfer to the VMU. With Trick Style, for example, I was able to load up a basic little snake game onto the VMU. It's nothing fancy, but it's a cool reminder of just how ambitious and weird Sega was during this era. Even these days, the VMU feels like something from the future. Or maybe a very specific version of the future imagined in 1999. Either way, it's one of the most delightfully unnecessary things in retro gaming, and I kinda love it for that. There's something special about the Dreamcast's library. It came from this rare in-between moment where consoles were starting to dream big, but arcades still had their claws deep in game design. Back in 1999, the Dreamcast felt like a bold step into uncharted territory, full of energy, experimentation, and a sense that gaming was about to evolve in exciting new ways. The games were fast, flashy, and not afraid to be weird. What you get were experiences built around instant gratification, wild racers, frantic fighters, rhythm games with attitude, and offbeat experiments that didn't exist anywhere else. It was Sega letting loose, sometimes brilliant, sometimes messy, but always creative. These weren't games trying to simulate life, they were trying to entertain you right now. And these days, that kind of design hits different. I don't think I have the time or energy to sink 100 hours into the latest epic RPG or open world checklist marathon. I just want to sit down, fire something up, and have a good time, without crafting systems or daily login bonuses. Dreamcast games respect your time by not wasting it. Even the genres reflect that. Arcade fighters, pick up and play sports titles, quirky platformers, and high score chasers. It's gaming that fits into real life, not the other way around. The Dreamcast was Sega's final swing in the console wars, and they went out swinging. It wasn't the most powerful system of its generation, and it certainly wasn't the most successful, but it was bold. Sega wasn't playing it safe. They were experimenting, taking risks, and making games that felt like nothing else at the time. And even when it didn't work, it was never boring. That spirit of experimentation is exactly why the Dreamcast still matters today. It's a console full of creative energy, the kind that feels rare now. Some ideas worked, some didn't, but almost all of them were interesting, and that spirit didn't disappear when Sega left the hardware business. It just moved into the hands of the fans. The audience never actually left. Modders have kept the console alive with replacement parts, fan-made ports, and even entire new releases. The Dreamcast may have been long out of production, but it still has a pulse, kept beating by the people who never stopped believing in it. So is the Dreamcast worth picking up today? I think so, but just know what you're getting into. The hardware has not aged as gracefully as many other retro consoles and will need to be serviced soon, if not already. And it's not exactly a cheap nostalgia trip. You can find newer consoles, even a PS4 Pro or Xbox One X, for less than what a complete Dreamcast setup might cost. For something that came out in the 90s, the price can be hard to justify. But then again, the Dreamcast was never about practicality. It was about bold ideas, strange experiments, and doing things that other consoles wouldn't dare to try. There's still something special in this little white box, a kind of magic that hasn't quite been replicated since. You just have to be the kind of person who's curious enough to chase it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks so much for your time today, guys. Goodbye.